August 29th, 2005, New Orleans. Early morning. Most residents were still asleep when the city began to drown. The wind had already reached hurricane force. The rain wasn't stopping for a single minute, but the real catastrophe began when the levees failed. At 5 a.m., the first reports came in. Water was breaking into the city. At first, slowly, then in a powerful surge. Within minutes, streets turned into rivers. Cars were swept away by the water. People climbed onto rooftops in panic. Some woke up to the sound of their neighbors screaming, others to windows shattering. Many realized they had to escape immediately. The water rose 1 meter, then 2 in some areas, up to rooftop level. People grabbed their children, documents, anything they could. Some became trapped in their attics. They had to break through their roofs to escape. Communication barely worked. Electricity was gone. The city was plunged into darkness. Thousands of people were trapped. Emergency services received hundreds of calls every minute, but reaching many neighborhoods was impossible. Helicopters began evacuating people from rooftops. People waved towels, sheets, and their hands. Some stayed on rooftops for hours, others for days. By morning, it became clear this was not just a hurricane. This was one of the largest disasters in U.S. history. More than 80% of the city was underwater. Thousands of homes were destroyed. Tens of thousands of people were left without help. It was the night New Orleans began to disappear. The night Hurricane Katrina became a catastrophe. Late August 2005, the Gulf Coast of the United States. New Orleans, one of the largest cities in the state of Louisiana, a city built among rivers, canals, and wetlands. Much of New Orleans lies below sea level. It is protected by levees and pumping stations. This system holds back the water and protects the city from flooding, but it requires constant operation and control. By the end of August, the situation begins to change. A storm strengthens in the Gulf of Mexico. It gradually gains power. With each passing hour, forecasts become more alarming. Experts warn of a possible strike on the coast. Authorities begin monitoring the situation closely. Emergency services move into a state of readiness. Meanwhile, water levels in the Gulf begin to rise. The wind gradually intensifies. The sky above the city grows darker. The first strong gusts of wind appear. Residents begin to realize a serious storm is approaching. By the night of August 29th, the situation becomes critical. The storm approaches the Louisiana coast. Winds strengthen to hurricane force. Water begins to press against the levees. Pumping stations operate at full capacity. The city stands in the path of a powerful udar. August 29, 2005, New Orleans finds itself at the center of one of the largest disasters in U.S. history.
How Hurricane Katrina formed and how powerful it became. The hurricane did not appear suddenly. It began forming several days before the disaster. On August 23, 2005, near the Bahamas, a tropical depression formed. At first, it did not cause serious concern, but the system began to strengthen rapidly. The warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean became its source of energy. The storm turned into a tropical hurricane. It was given the name Katrina. As it moved across Florida, the hurricane continued to gain strength. But the most dangerous phase came later. When it entered the Gulf of Mexico, conditions became ideal for intensification. Warm water and low pressure allowed the hurricane to rapidly increase in power. Wind speeds rose dramatically. The hurricane reached Category 5, the highest level on the Saffir-Simpson scale. This means catastrophic destruction. Later, before making landfall, its strength weakened slightly, but it still remained extremely dangerous. The main impact struck the state of Louisiana. New Orleans was hit the hardest. Severe damage also occurred in the states of Mississippi and Alabama. Coastal cities were flooded. Homes were destroyed. Infrastructure was devastated. The storm surge reached several meters. This led to massive flooding. Hurricane Katrina became one of the most powerful and destructive storms in U.S. history. The disaster affected millions of people, and its consequences were felt for many years.
That night, the situation began to deteriorate rapidly. The wind intensified with every minute. The rain turned into a solid wall of water. The streets quickly filled. The drainage system stopped coping. The first areas began to lose electricity. The city was gradually plunged into darkness. Communication worked intermittently. People woke up from the noise of wind and rain. Some looked out the windows. Others tried to shelter inside their homes. The pressure of the water continued to rise. The levees, which were supposed to protect the city, were under critical strain. At first, nothing happened. It seemed the system would hold, but inside, destruction had already begun. And then it happened. One section could not withstand it. A dull sound echoed. The structure cracked. Water began to seep through. At first, slowly, almost unnoticed, but the flow quickly intensified. The crack widened, and in a single moment, the water broke into the city. A powerful surge rushed forward, with incredible force. Streets disappeared under water within minutes. Cars were swept away by the current. Homes began to fill with water. People climbed upward in panic. Some moved to attics. Others climbed onto rooftops. Some broke through ceilings to escape. The water kept rising, first to the knees, then to the waist, then to the level of windows, in some areas to the rooftops. The city was disappearing. There was only water all around. Cries for help echoed, but reaching people was almost impossible. Thousands of residents were trapped. Time moved slowly. The heat increased. Food and water were running out. No one knew how long it would last. Later, helicopters appeared in the sky. People raised their hands, waved clothes, shouted. This was a chance, but saving everyone was impossible. Some were lifted. Others were left waiting. Somewhere there were screams. Somewhere, gunshots. The city descended into chaos. Stores were looted. People searched for water and food. Order disappeared. This was no longer just a disaster. This was a fight for survival. When the water began to recede, the city was unrecognizable. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Thousands of people lost everything. Many never returned home. Years passed, but the consequences are still felt. It was a tragedy that can never be forgotten. After the collapse of the levee on August 29, 2005, New Orleans descended into chaos. With most of the police force deployed to search and rescue operations, the city experienced a sharp rise in criminal activity. Widespread looting and break-ins began, especially in abandoned and unoccupied homes. These incidents continued for several months after the disaster. Experts linked the surge in crime to the city's deeper social issues, high poverty rates, and long-standing neighborhoods where violence had already been part of everyday life. According to findings referenced by the U.S. Congress, the situation escalated to what was described as an epidemic of violence, with homicide rates exceeding 93 cases per 100,000 residents during that period. On August 30th, CNN reported large-scale looting across the city. According to the network, hundreds of people in the Canal Street area and near the French Quarter were smashing storefront windows and openly taking merchandise. On September 1st, reports emerged of gunfire directed at a local hospital. Medical staff stated that the facility came under repeated fire, including during patient evacuation efforts. There were also reports of attacks on boats transporting injured people, one of which capsized. Later, that same day, a FEMA representative announced a temporary suspension of rescue operations due to security threats. The Coast Guard also reported that rescue teams were avoiding areas where gunfire was being heard. The crisis did not remain limited to New Orleans. Neighboring cities that received evacuees also experienced rising crime rates. In Houston, for example, an increase in violent crime was linked to the influx of displaced residents. According to police data, evacuees from New Orleans were allegedly involved in a significant share of homicides recorded in the city during that period. Hurricane Katrina covered an area of approximately 90,000 square miles and destroyed the homes of around 700,000 people. The total economic damage was estimated at $125 billion, while the U.S. Congress allocated about $110 billion for recovery and reconstruction efforts. As a result of the disaster, between 150,000 and 160,000 buildings were destroyed or severely damaged, most of which were beyond repair. More than 100,000 families were forced to live in temporary shelters, and FEMA provided trailers after the hurricane. Even by 2008, the city had only recovered about 60% of its population and less than half of its pre-storm job levels, highlighting the scale of the long-term damage.